Facing a midlife crisis? Find courage in everyday women's stories. Subscribe to Resilient Women Rising.
The rain hammered against the roof of the terraced house in York, a relentless drumbeat that mirrored the chaos in Claire Tennyson's chest. At 48, she stood in her kitchen, staring at the eviction notice trembling in her hands. The landlord's scrawl was curt rent overdue, vacate by month's end. It had been 6 months since her husband, Paul, died in a car accident on the A64, leaving her a widow with no savings, no life insurance, and a grief so heavy it pinned her to the earth. The part-time cashier job at the co-op barely covered groceries, let alone the $800 monthly rent. Claire was drowning, and the water was rising fast. She sank onto a stool, the cold tile biting through her slippers. Paul had been the breadwinner, a mechanic with steady hands and a quick laugh. Claire had been content as his shadow raising their son, Owen, now 22 and working in Manchester, and keeping their small life tidy. Without him, she was a ghost in her own story, unsure of who she was or what she could do. The job market in York mocked her. Retail wanted youth. Offices demanded degrees she didn't have. Panic clawed at her throat. She had 3 weeks to find a miracle. The miracle arrived in a battered cardboard box, delivered by a neighbor clearing out their loft. "Found this in Paul's old stuff," they said, handing it over with a sympathetic nod. Inside was a Nikon camera, its lens scratched, but intact, and a tangle of film rolls relics from a hobby Claire had loved in her 20s. She'd been a shutterbug once, chasing light through the Yorkshire moors, snapping candid shots of strangers at the Shambles Market. Her photos had won a regional prize at 24, a black and white of a shepherd and his dog against a stormy sky. But Paul's gentle teasing, always hiding behind that thing and the demands of motherhood, had shelved her passion. Could she still see the world that way? With nothing left to lose, Claire dusted off the Nikon and loaded a roll of film she found in the box, the expiration date long past. She stepped into the rain-slicked streets of York, the minster's spires piercing the gray. Her first shots were shaky blurred cobblestones, a pigeon mid-flight, but as she wandered, something clicked. The camera felt like an extension of her, a way to frame the chaos. She captured a busker's crooked smile, rain pooling in the creases of his face, a child splashing in a puddle, joy defying the gloom. For a few hours, grief loosened its grip. Back home, she turned the bathroom into a makeshift darkroom, the chemical tang of developers sharp in her nose. The prints emerged like ghosts on paper, flawed but alive. She pinned them to a clothesline, strung across the living room, studying each one. They weren't perfect overexposed, grainy, but they had heart. Claire wondered, could this be more than a distraction? Enter Sarah Patel, a wiry 60-year-old who ran a cafe near Clifford's Tower. Claire met her while photographing the cafe's steamed-up windows, the glow of fairy lights bleeding through the mist. Sarah poked her head out, curious. "You a professional?" she asked, eyeing the Nikon. Claire stammered, "No, just trying something." Sarah grinned. "Good enough for me. I need new shots for the menu boards. Fancy a gig?" It was 50 cash in hand, and Claire nearly dropped her camera. She said yes before she could overthink it. The cafe job sparked a flicker of hope. Claire delivered the photos close-ups of frothy lattes and crumbling scones, and Sarah loved them, pinning one to the wall. Word spread. A florist on Stonegate hired her to shoot bouquets for their website. A dog walker wanted portraits of their scruffy charges. Claire bought fresh film with her earnings, her hands steadier with each roll. She wasn't making much, 200 one month, 300 the next, but it was something. She started a portfolio, a battered notebook, stuffed with prints, and dared to dream of stability. Then came the setback. A glossy gallery on Gillygate hosted an open call for local photographers, a chance to exhibit alongside pros. Claire submitted 3 shots: the busker, the puddle jumper, and a new, only a silhouette of rowers on the Ouse at dawn. She arrived at the judging heart, pounding, only to hear a curator dismiss her work. Amateurish, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. No vision, no polish. The other entrants, young, artsy types with sleek digital gear, whispered behind their hands. Claire fled, the Nikon heavy around her neck. She was a fool, a widow with delusions, not a photographer. That night, she sat on her sagging sofa, the eviction deadline 2 days away. The camera mocked her from the coffee table. But then Owen called, his voice crackling through the line. "Mom, I saw your pics on Sarah's Instagram. They're brilliant. Don't stop." His pride pierced her despair. She thought of Paul, who'd loved her quiet strength, and her own mother, who'd sewn dresses by lamplight to feed them after Dad left. Claire wasn't a quitter. She picked up the Nikon and vowed to try again. The next morning, she marched to the riverside, the air sharp with autumn. She shot the Ouse in a frenzy mist, curling off the water, gulls slicing the sky until her fingers ached. In the dark room, she poured her soul into the prints, tweaking contrasts until they sang. She didn't have a gallery, but she had Sarah's cafe. With permission, Claire hung 5 photos on the walls, handwritten price tags beneath 30 each. By week's end, 3 sold to tourists, drawn by the rawness of her lens. The cafe became her launch pad. Regulars spread the word, and soon Claire was booking shoots, weddings, pet portraits, even a feature for a local magazine. She bartered with the landlord photos of the property for a rent extension. He agreed, grumbling but impressed. By Christmas, she'd scraped together enough to stay. Her fridge, stocked with more than instant noodles. Owen came home, beaming at the walls lined with her work. "You're a proper photographer, Mum," he said, and she believed him. At 49, Claire Tennyson leased a corner of Sarah's cafe as a tiny studio, offering prints and beginner workshops. Her classes' clumsy, heartfelt affairs drew widows, retirees, and teens, all fumbling with cameras under her patient eye. She wasn't rich, wasn't famous, but she was standing. One crisp morning, she stood on the city walls, the Nikon raised, framing York's rooftops against a pink dawn. The shutter clicked, and Claire smiled. She'd lost everything, then found herself in the light,